good evening everybody, welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me.
Down the inside,
absolutely impossible scene.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He needs to get it done now.
Blakey will dive to the inside.
We'll go bust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Because here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Jarno Watmere is your champion.
Alright, here we are then. Now with a full view, welcome everyone to PSGL once more. This is season 41 and we're going to kick off all things here down under in Melbourne for the first race of this season at Albert Park. I'll be your host for tonight. My name is Mit Sky and joined, at least the regular pairing for us that is, but now from F4 up to F3 is Max.
Hello everybody, pleasure to be back in the F3 comms box once again, and yeah, should be a very exciting season ahead. As Myth's already mentioned, we're here at Australia. Should be a very frantic opening round to the season, and we can really highlight who could be some contenders coming on for the rest of the season ahead.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's quickly look at the placements before we take a look at our calendar, and then you have a little bit of an idea of what will all be going down this season. And then hopefully down there at the chat on YouTube, you can also let us know who you are supporting and who you think is going to claim the title, which will be in 2026. So the season will continue quite a while. So only after Christmas and the New Year will crown a champion. But here we go then, quickly moving on to our lineups. These are our placements. We have the full-time drivers of Gabor Santos, Victor Riedler, Daniel Kuijer, Thomas Seto-Elia, Wojciech Stech, I hope I say her name correctly, Thomas Kokeni, Zalan Bieder, Steven Vaso, Oleg Napadovsky, and Valentino Labella on our first row. And then our second row is Francesco Lago, Alexander Dimas, Jensen Rausen, Carlos Galindo, Igor Piasecki, Eve Gobadi, Jona Machtens, Dennis Langrock, Lucas Beisner, and Casper Flach. And then, of course, we have 6 reserve drivers. Those reserve drivers will be Boba, Reinhard Sprogus, Jeremy Gallané, Givano Kennis, Mattia Ramineri, and Leonard Deckers. Out of those drivers, Max, whole bunch. Who jumps out for you?
Definitely both Gabor Santos and Oleg Napadovsky. They're two drivers that, especially last season with Napadovsky, are just so fast and they're just so consistent and clinical with what they do. Of course, Napadovsky went all the way from F5 up to F3 last season, and now he's here to stay for a full season, hopefully. But then you got the likes of Alexander Dimas, who was the champion of F4 last season, and Jensen Rosen, who we both know quite well. And they're both drivers that can potentially throw in their hand at what's going to be ahead in the championship and maybe fight for that title. So it could be anybody's. All these drivers are here purely on merit. And I think it's going to be a very nicely, closely contested grid where from one week to the next, we don't know who's going to be fastest.
Yeah, it's also nice to see so many familiar names. The likes of Tomas Kokeni, Zalan Bieder, seen in previous seasons. You already mentioned Oleg Napadovsky, who really last season was too good for F4 and was promoted after a couple of races after just winning them. Some of them even with I think like 8 or 9 second gap, which is quite unheard of. And of course Ferrari man Jonah Martin, so it's nice to see some familiar faces. For tonight though, we will have 2 of our stand-ins showing up. And I believe that were Gallané and Deckers, but I'm not 100% sure. I can double check for everyone real quick.
Yeah, qualifying is just getting underway. A few cars just about to set their first flying laps. But quickly about the calendar, I'll speed through this so we can get trackside as quickly as possible. We got Belgium for round 2, of course, Australia here for round 1, Texas round 3, then a break week, followed by Monaco, Austria, Canada, Silverstone, and then Mexico for PC on the 18th of December. Then we have a break into the new year, have Christmas off, have New Year off, and then we'll hop straight back on the 5th of January for Mexico on the PlayStation side, and then the week after it's back to basics. It's Jeddah, Brazil, and Abu Dhabi for both console and PC. But yeah, 11 rounds of this season should be it's a very well-rounded calendar. Many favourites on there indeed, as Booba is just going to be heading round the final corner. He's also standing in tonight for one of the drivers as he's now heading through the final couple of corners. Let's see what the Ferrari driver can do. This will be the benchmark of the season.
Yeah, so Boba, one of our stand-in drivers, so it looks like the order was not fully correct. He does set the first lap time in a 14.7. We have, I believe that's Victor Whitler starting just behind. I was watching Gabor Santos earlier on when I just got into the game, but there's a couple drivers up ahead that are setting their times. Alan Beaters just set one, which is half a tenth off of the fastest lap time set by the Ferrari man. Santos now heading into the final sectors. Tomas Kenny goes half a tenth quicker, and Oleg Napadovsky beats that with another 200ths of a second. So we're now on board with the Red Bull man, trying to take it a little bit careful down to those final 2 corners, maximizing his output on the exit as Kara goes quickest. As for Santos, it's actually our new fastest lap time, a 1:14.588, as we're approaching more and more drivers. Rousen now going quickest. Max, it's hard to keep up with everyone just beating the times.
It certainly is. Time's coming in thick and fast. Next up will be Valentino Labella. What can you do in the Haas car? He goes up to 4 cars. There's plenty of drivers into those 0.5s. Dimas now to the top of the standings on a 14.4. Just over half a tenth clear of Jensen Rosa. Brilliant stuff from the Mercedes man, is that we still have the 2 McLarens to head up to the line. That's Victor Vidler and Steven Vasso. So what can Vidler do as he now heads up to the line? He does a 14.5, just slots in behind Rosen, his teammate of Steven Vasso. He goes into 5th fastest on a 14.5 as well. Oh, so close throughout this field. Lap times can be found and positions can be found with a mere improvement of a few hundredths.
Yeah, exactly as you put it, and quite a few going high up into the stands. The last 3 runners, 3rd for Victor, 4th for Gallané, and a 6th place for now for Steven Vassor. Currently checking the only man still on a hot lap, Igor Piasecki, but I don't think he is for 45.7. We are looking for 0.7s, but I'm not sure if it was a 45 or anything else. But if he is, no, he's not going flat out. He has a lot of energy saved up. I'm curious to see if he's going to continue that run or not. If he's on it, he should be close to Labella's lap times, but otherwise we might see him dive into pit lane, but I think he's quite a couple seconds off. I think we were gunning for 42s and not 45.7s, and indeed he does go into pit lane. A few drivers already out. Not sure if they started a little bit later or if they had to abort their first lap, but we currently have 4 drivers out on track getting ready for a hot lap. Those are Kasper Flak, Wojtek Sech, Lucas Beisner, and Francesco Lago, out of which Lucas will be the first one. No, actually no. Or he might be. No, it's Flak.
Actually just first one on to the road. He's actually on a lap time currently right now. Teammate to Gabor Santos as he makes his way up into turn 4 and then into turn 4 there, sorry, and then up into turn 5. This quick right-hander makes you just keep it away from the wall. Lots of natural one to steer through there. 6 is this little kink right, and then into 7. And it's very nicely done through there for Wojtek Steg. Apparently a purple first sector coming the way of the Red Bull driver. Through turn 8, this flat-out right-hander. And then you put the DRS on, burn all that battery you possibly can, but you still need to save some for the next DRS stretch. You turn into turn 9 and 10, the flip-flap chicane, down to 7th gear, bring the car out wide on exit, and then DRS open once more, all the way down into turn 11. Late on the brakes, around about the 75 meters down to third gear. Just missed that inside apex curve. Was a little bit too far wide over the exit curve as he now heads through 12 and then up into 13. Looks her ears ever so slightly through the final braking zone. Then a tricky final corner to get the power down the car. Just wanting to step out on you all the time as he makes his way to the line. Will this be for Wojtek Szczeg? It's only good enough for 14th fastest. Exactly dead heat with Zalan Bieda in front as well of 14.786, and then Kasper Flack just behind. What can the V-Carb do on his second stab at the cherry?
Yeah, it looks like he was a little bit quicker down that middle sector, so should be heading up above them, and indeed does slot in nicely in P7. Behind him, Francesco Lago is about to cross the line, and he sets the fastest lap time by a massive margin. I already thought his middle sector was quick, but he's almost a tenth and a half quicker than our previous provisional pole sitter of Alexander Dimas. That was a 1:14.4. Now we have a 1:14.346 as the fastest lap out there. As we see, Beisner is just on for a lap, but he does seem to be saving a little bit of energy as well, so I'm not sure if he did invalidate last time out, but I think so if we look at the speed here. So there is no more quick run from him. Just quickly checking if we have other drivers. I think our Ferrari man in Boba is currently going for a quick run. And he's already in Sector 3, so I think we'll be setting his second lap time in a moment's notice.
Yes, he certainly will, but I think as I just said there in the middle sector, he's about 8.5 tenths down, so I think he might just be aborting into pit lane at this time around. We'll see as he makes his way now through the penultimate corner and up into 14. Yeah, darting into pit lane is Buba, and unfortunately for Boba, he has aborted that one, potentially made a mistake somewhere in the first sector, or even somewhere in the middle. And he has to reside in 14th place currently. Disappointing for Ferrari so far. Gabadi and Buba both down in 14th and 18th respectively on a 14.7 or 14.8 as well. But we have the next set of drivers now out onto the road, and to lead this herd of cars onto the circuit at this midpoint of the session, it is going to be Jensen Rosen, the man who currently sits third fastest. Can he rival Francesco Lago's time?
Yeah, and for this next lap, we're going to go on board with the Williams man around this 5.2, almost 5.3 kilometer track, 14 turns in total, and for the race, important 4 DRS zones. But more about that later. We're going to go on for a hot lap with our Williams man as he powers down that main straight, heading towards turn 1, where we see someone just darting out of pit lane. It's a very tricky first turn. You have to attack it very hard and making sure that you don't step out of bounds and pick up track limits, something that will be monitored closely throughout this race as per the stewards' ruling. As we now watch Jensen approach the end of that first sector, is taking through a lot of speed, but is he a little bit quicker than he was before? He is by about half a tenth, and that was a great turn 7, so he might be on for an improvement here. Down the middle sector, powering it through the second DRS zone of this track before he has to lift only momentarily, and he identically matches his sector, does go a little bit out of bounds there, and has indeed picked up track limits. So that unfortunately is the lap for Rowson, but he knows in sector 1 there's more in it.
There is certainly more on the table for Jensen Rosen through that first and potentially middle sector as well, being identical. That's so difficult to do, especially when it comes to just a few milliseconds. And he was somehow able to match that middle sector. But we're on board now with his teammate Carlos Galindo, who currently sits 17th fastest on a 14.8. Is he going to be able to find anything to at least rival that top 10? We'll need to find about 2 tenths of a second. DRS open for Galindo now as he makes his way to the start-finish line. Across the line he goes, up to third fastest. Just beats his teammate of Jensen Rosen to that third place spot. And that is a very strong lap time indeed. When the Alpines alive, I think that might be Kokeni. No, it's Bieda who goes up to 13th. His teammate Kokeni will be heading up to the line very shortly through the final corner. He goes, but goes wide and into the wall for Tamas Kokeni. And that's going to bring a halt to Shorty. He's lap, but he still goes second fastest, hitting the wall at the final corner and still somehow finding the time to put himself in the front row.
That was quite a crazy lap from Kokeni, who now sits in second, but I don't think for long because Dimas was up a 10th.5 in that middle sector. Definitely gunning for a provisional pole, at least for now. But does he beat Francesco Lago to the first? Yes, he does. It's a 14-2, and we're breaking barriers more and once more again. So great work by him. In the meantime, Valentino Labella also set a quicker lap time. It's now up to 6th. As I'm currently checking who is on for another lap. I think Gallané is currently on a lap. He finds himself for now at least in P9, with Santos now going into P3. Gallané is up by about 0.04 of a second, so definitely need another improvement down that final sector. Otherwise he's only going to jump a few places, but improve a little bit more there and you might find yourself in P5 without too much more effort there. So a couple corners left, 3 more to go. Down into the final bit where we've seen some McLaren spin off earlier in the real season. But here we go then, turn 14. Keep it nice and tight. Does seem to do so well. And he's now heading down the main straight. Can he go quick enough? It does improve slightly more, but it's only P8 for now for Gallané.
Yeah, Gallané only 8th fastest, but still won't be too disappointed with that because the front row is only a further 2 tenths away. So close throughout this field so far. So actually, Francesco Lago is on his lap. He's validated and unfortunately darting into pit lane for him to have one last attempt to try and beat Alexander Dimas's lap time. As we now got Lucas Baisner now up to the line. What can he do in the kick? Sauber, he goes, actually stays 20th. And again, another invalidation for the kick Sauber driver. And it's just more disappointment for Lucas Baisner as he's not able to get a lap time on the board. All the pressure now resides on his final lap.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very tough one for him. But in the meantime, of course, first it's a little bit easier to look at this, looking at the grid of F4 last season, just to see how well they can step up to the occasion and compete with the former F3 members and the other people that were promoted. Our current provisional pole sitter, Dimas, of course, champion from F4 last time. He was promoted. Galindo, who is also in that fight, in 5th and also 6th for Rausen. Gallané was with us in F4 last season as well, currently P8. Piasecki and Vaso, 12th and 13th. Napadovsky promoted somewhere through, and then you've got Badi and Beisner, 19th and 20th, also F4 men last season that managed to get that step up into F3 where they really can put themselves hopefully in the spotlight of some of the bigger teams out there. But now we'll have a little bit of a waiting game with 3 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock. Some drivers will be leaving pit lane in a moment's notice as we prepare for our final runs and our fight for pole position here, the first race of the season in Albert Park.
Yeah, the fight for pole, the first pole of the season, of course. This is what it all boils down to. And we do have the point for pole position as well. So whoever gets pole will lead the championship into the first round. And currently, that is going the way of Alexander Dimas. But we could see with how close this field spread is, anybody could take this one. Baisner could still pull a lap out of the essence, out of the fire that's been this just abysmal session so far, and somehow put it to the top. Or maybe even one of Ferraris. We do not know. This is what it all comes down to, though. Alexander Dimas currently on that provisional pole spot for Francesco Lago on the front row. Can someone in the mid-pack contest it? Will Dimas improve even more and throw the gauntlet down to everybody else? That is going to be the real big questions. We now have 2 minutes and 25 left on the clock. And the first one out of the circuit is going to be Buba.
Yeah, I'm just currently looking who of the top men, the men that can potentially contest for pole were out. I believe Rausen was the first one out there. But another man I want to keep an eye on is Francesco Lago. He's only set 1 lap time so far, and that's only a half a tenth away from the fastest lap time from Dimas, who's currently out of pit lane. So he'll be one of the final couple drivers to set a lap there tonight. In the meantime, for everyone watching, let us know as well who you think is going to take pole position, whether that will be between Dimas, Lago and Santos, or if someone else is going to put a cat out of the bag, so to speak, and surprise us all with a pole position for this first round. And as Max mentioned, that also comes with a point But we're now going to watch our Ferrari man. He will be the first one to lead the pack for our final few runs. And I can only say, Max, take it away.
Here we are then for the start of the final runs of the first qualifying session of the season here in Albert Park, and it's going to be Booba to take us away as he heads down into turn 1, braking around about 75 metres down to 5th gear over that outside exit curb as well. DRS will then be open as you head all the way up into turn 3, braking at the black box, down to 3rd gear, a little lock up at the front right, just putting him a little wide of the apex, the rear of the car, sliding about as well as he makes his way through 4 and now into 5, just glances that inside curve quite nicely, doesn't use all the track he possibly can as we now head into turn 7, he's down by a 10th in that first sector already. It's going to be oh so difficult to find the rest of the lap time now, especially through the middle sector, because it's only one corner. It's that middle part of the lap. It's all just this DRS zone now as you make it up into turns 9 and 10 through the first middle sector split. He has found a little bit more time. If only that first sector was in the green. DRS now open as we head down into turn 11. Going to be braking again around about 75 metres. Want to just gently glance that inside curve. He takes a little bit too much of it low, sends the car up onto 2 wheels as we now head through turn 12. A little bit of traffic on that left-hand side before hitting the brakes once more down to 3rd gear through 13. Then through 14 when we saw Kokeni hit the wall. DRS open for Booba. I don't think we're going to see an improvement potentially here from him though. There's a weave of frustration and he will stay 18th fastest. Disaster for Ferrari as we have more drivers now heading to the line.
Yeah, one of them is Jensen Ralston's about a 10th up in the middle sector. Zallenbieder has gone up into 4th place, but for Ralston, one of the man to watch. He goes into P3 for now. Zontos was down in his middle sector as he's now about to come across the line, but I think next up we should watch Francesco Lago. No, it's actually Zontos who goes quickest out of nowhere. Even though it was down in the middle sector, Lago now goes fastest, so it looks like there's a lot of time to be found in that final sector. Dimas has invalidated by going way too wide there in that final corner as Galindo slots in nicely into P4 for now. Now we still have Gallané who is up in the middle sector too, but can he still beat Lago's lap time? That pole time of 1:14.238. Gallané comes across the line. He can only do 12 fastest. Whitler then is up next. That's a good middle sector, but is it enough? It's only enough for P7. Now we have a couple more, but I'm not sure if they can contest our pole man for now. Beisner has invalidated once more, so he won't set a lap time. Boba's not on for a fast one. Wojtek is, but he was already down a couple tens in that middle sector, so won't be improving much. And with that, we have everyone across the line, Max. It's pole position for Francesco Lago for the opening round of the season, and he takes that 1 point heading into the race.
Wow, brilliant lap time there from Francesco Lago under that pressure. Both him and Zontos were actually down on their laps in that middle sector. And then they just were able to hook up that final sector enough. And they are the front row of the grid here this evening. It's Lago on pole from Zontos in second. We're just waiting for Booba to come into pit lane or just to retire out on the road. If anything, he should just retire on the road to make sure we can get this moving on quite swiftly. But to think as well here, if Dimas invalidating his lap, he crumbled under that pressure. And for Zontos and Lago, them seeing themselves down in that middle sector split, they would have known that they have to really hook up that final sector. They have to hustle that car as much as they can without overdriving the car, because it's so easy just to maybe get a little bit too ahead of yourself and overdrive it ever so slightly. But Lago and Zontos were able to pull it off to perfection to get that front row of the grid and brutally deny Alexander Dimas that first pole position on his debut race in F3.
Yeah, and with that, we now have the Ferrari man coming across the line, meaning that we can take a closer look at those standings. But it was quite a surprise to see really how much of an improvement there still was in that final sector. But here we go then. Pole position for Francesco Lago and the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, followed by Gabor Santos. Then it's Alexander Dimas, Carlos Galindo, Tomasco Kenny in 5th, followed by Rausen in 6th, Victor Rittler in 7th, Igor Biazeszki, Steven Vasso, and rounding off our top 10 is Zallenbieder in the Alpine. Well, we've got quite something to prepare for tonight. A fairly long race in Albert Park. And let's be real, it's very nice to have this as an opening round this season. It feels like this is just how it belongs. You want to have the race in Albert Park as the first one in the season, and I think that's just a nice way to have it.
Yeah, it's just an amazing circuit to have as the first round. Of course, we're going to be ready to get going ever so shortly. So the drivers now just load into the race, just need to get their strategies and fuel loads set out. But yeah, it's so nice to have Albert Park because I think it's a real challenge, but it has a mix of everything: slow speed, high speed corners, and also the medium speed as well. So it tests you as a driver straight out the blocks, being the first round of the season, and being a street circuit as well. The walls are so close to you too, so it just has everything. It is the ultimate circuit when it comes to that. And it just makes every different sector, every different corner such a challenge. And I think that's what drivers like the most about it, is that it's so difficult to drive that it makes it fun because you are constantly focused. You have to be on your A game here at Australia. If you're a little bit off the ball, you're not going to see yourselves really have a good performance or a strong lap in qualifying and have a good consistent race. So it really does favour the brave, favour the drivers that are a bit more confident in themselves and in their cars. And we're about to get underway here, Myth, so take us to the 5 red lights.
Oh, we have 5 red lights already, and off they go, and away we are, the opening round of Season 41 here at PSGL PC F3, as it's Francesco Lago who's got the best start out there and stays ahead of everyone as we have the middle pack going through corners 1 and 2. So you have a few positions change. It's a Mercedes pulling out. That is the Mercedes of Oleg Napadowski. So let me quickly check if he has got any damage there, because he pulled out quite convincingly and indeed is missing a front wing end plate, so there was some contact through turns 1 and 2, which means he will be dropping back quite significantly. Now let us see if we can find which drivers have been able to get anything there. Of course, have to go to the position changes. 3 gained for Kuijer and Boba, 2 gained for Casper Flack, and 1 gained for Zalan Peter. The losses going out to Vaso and Tomasetto Elia with 1, and 7 places lost for Oleg Napadovsky. So he now re-overtakes Wojciech Sek for P18. But up ahead, everything remains unchanged for a top 8, as Francisco Lago has a healthy 7/10 gap to Gabor Santos.
Yeah, it's such a short run to turn 1, and Francesco Lago was able to capitalise on that indeed. 6 attempts clear so far, but of course DRS will be enabled once we cross that start-finish line, and that's when Jontos, Dimas and Galindo could potentially start to make their threat known to the V-Carb, as Tomasetto Elia is able to get past Buba there for 15th place. Is still side by side heading down to turn 1, but the Aston Martin is able to get that move done and up into 15th place. Talking about tyres, everybody on the mediums except from Wojtek Steg and Lucas Beisner, they're both on the hard compound of tyres. They'll be looking to go long in this first to try and make up those places, and potentially on that second stint glide their way through the order. So we'll be going through some short-term pain for some long-term gain at the start of this one. But as DRS is now enabled, Francesco Lago 7 cents clear of Jontos. If anything, we could potentially see Alexander Dimas get that move done before Jontos even threatens Lago.
Well, let's quickly look at Dimas, who's indeed closed down to within 2/10 of the men up ahead. But with now the 3rd DRS zone, it is the Red Bull man getting quite close to Lago up in 1st. We have 4 DRS zones on this track, quite a lot that you see all the way around. We have one to start-finish straight, that's your last one of the track. We have one after turn 2 leading up into turn 3. Then at the end of the 1st sector, we have a detection point, which is just after turn 6, with the first zone from turn 8 to 9, and our second after that fast left right-hander that we just saw. That is DRS zone number 3, as we just see I think it was Tomasco Kenny slotting in before Jensen Rouse when we got awfully close to the man behind. So some good fighting going on all the way throughout the track. Another thing that I want to mention about the track that we are here tonight, it's a semi-permanent track. So despite the fact that it feels like a street circuit, it is a track that they need to build up every year, for which they start about 2 months before the race actually starts, and then it stays for about 6 weeks after the F1 race is being held. And next year actually will be the 30th anniversary, as it's been on the calendar since 1996, which also happens to be my birthday year.
Oh. so the Albert Park circuit is the same age as Myth here in the comms box. But we do have Tamas Kokeni really starting to put that pressure onto Carlos Galindo for this 4th place, and he's actually potentially having to attack Dimas. It's the Williams driver to make sure he holds onto the position, but Kokeni just sits behind as we headed into turn 11 there. Largo still holding a comfortable half a second lead at the front of this group. Let's see if Kokeni's going to go for that move this time around into turn 1. Like we saw on that last attempt, he's going to tuck into that slipstream of Galindo, potentially use a little bit of battery. He's getting closer and closer, but just tucks out of it to make sure he's able to keep a nice distance as they hit the brakes. Steg sets the fastest lap on those hard compounded tyres. Could they start to come into their own at this stage of the race? As we see Kokeni nearly into the back of Galindo, really having to put the lock on and lock those front tyres up, as Victor Fittler is able to get past Jensen Rosen as they're now side by side through turn 4 and now into 5, and the McLaren driver moves himself forward. We have our first change in the top 8, and it's for the McLaren as he's now going to try potentially attack Kokeni.
Yeah, and the big question is how much damage did that do to his tires? Does he have a flat spot, or if he can just continue nicely there? But for now, at least, it seems to be all smooth and fairing, but we have to see in the hard braking zones if that is going to change. Yeah, the fastest lap being set by the man in P19 is quite unique, I have to say, though. Even though, well, he is on the hards, the rest, except for one, is all on mediums, but everyone really is in that DRS train, so getting the fastest lap despite being pretty much at the back of the DRS train, that's pretty impressive.
It certainly is. He's actually scrapping away with Oleg Nepodolsky here. He's just gone for the move, got switched back by the Mercedes, and he's actually made the Mercedes go deep into the corner. Of course, Nepodolsky with that wing damage, who now elects to come into pit lane. But Steg is able to get that move done now as we head down that main straight. Oh, and Napodolsky 10 seconds, and that's not how we'd like his season to start. He's our first retirement, our first casualty of the evening as the Bell is able to get past Kasper Flack. Same with Jeremy Gallonay as well, as they're now side by side heading up into turn 4. Are we going to see the B Cup come out on top, or will it be the Frenchman in the kick? Sauber around the outside will go Jeremy Gallonay. Flack really squeezing him, some contact made through turn 4, now into 5. And the kick Sauber just has to give way, and that's now allowing Tomasetto Alea to get by on the inside for turn 7. There's more contact between the pair, some real tyre hooking, and Gallonay seeds another place, and it could be a third, as Buba and also Ave Gabadi are going to be all over the back of him as we head down into turns 9 and 10. Gallonay going to use this as an opportunity, though, to attack Tomasetto in front of him. Not able to get the move done, though, and everything stays as it was down at the bottom of the field as we entered that straight. But certainly some elbows out racing to kickstart this season as Tamas Kokeni, fully went for the move there on Galindo, just was able to sit behind and not hit the Williams driver.
Yeah, in the meantime, I was also busy checking some of the cars because we saw some good calls from the chat whether Stephen Vaso had any damage, and indeed he is also missing a front wing end plate. I'm quickly going to see if we can check all the cars. Lago is fine, Santos should be fine as well. Same can be said about Dimas. Galindo is all good to go. Kenny's fine. Let's see, Whitler is also good. Rowson should be fine as well. So far, all good. Yeah, Soundbeater is not missing anything. Vaso is missing from our view is left front wing end plate. Guy, was he missing one as well? I don't think so. No, Gaia's not missing one. Bella's not missing anything. Flax coming through now. His car's all good. I think it's just a couple of cars that are missing their front wing end plates. So yeah, it was a damage for Napodovsky and for Vaso. But Vaso is actually doing quite well to stay up there, only losing one place, Max.
Yeah, he's doing really well with that front wing damage. I think that DRS and just how much this circuit is straight line speed does help you keep those positions, especially when you're, of course, in that DRS train and you're able to hang on to everybody and not lose too much time and have the same speed down those straights. But I think at the front of the field, Kokeni needs to get past Galindo here. He's just being held up ever so slightly by the Williams man. He could potentially pose a threat to Alexander Dimas. Can Tamas Kokeni? He's going to look to the inside for turn 1. Late on the brakes he goes. Is this going to be the move? Galindo goes off the road though. And Kokeni, into the back of Galindo. Kokeni slides across the road. Fiddler involved too, as Jensen Rosen's now going to go to the inside of Kokeni. And now here comes Fiddler as well. Round the outside outside will go the McLaren driver, but the Alpine will hold firm. They've both got wing damage now as well, of course, as Galindo went off the road at turn 1, just completely overcooked it, trying to hold on to his position to Kokeni, slid straight back across the road, and the Alpine and the McLaren having nowhere to go, and they go straight into the back of Carlos Galindo. Drama here on lap 7 of 29, and that's allowed the top 3 to break away.
Has allowed the top 3 to break away indeed, as Piasecki takes 2 man in that second DRS zones, now moving up all the way to P6 ahead of Kokeni and Whitler. But indeed, we have to see if the top 3 can break away. Galindo's now 1.4 seconds away. The DRS zone so powerful here that he also has to look behind, as Piasecki has dropped down more than a second behind, as well as Whitler is about to do the same thing. So gaps are starting to emerge. As for Galindo, he really needs to make sure he closes that as soon as possible. Otherwise, he's going to be under threat by everyone behind him. Thankfully for him, so far, that is only Rowson, who is in about half a second. But up ahead, the gaps should stay a little bit more than they are, as Kokeni has dropped down even to P9 with that front wing end plate damage, and is now just ahead of Vaso, who in turn is under pressure by the Aston Martin of Daniel Kuijer in P11, as Labella gets past Flack, who's trading places with him, and it looks like Flack just stays ahead for P12.
Black just holding on to that position against Valentino Labella, but look at what that front wing damage has done to the field, especially at the front. Just look at all that field spread. Now Jensen Rowson could be going for that move on his teammate Galindo. Yes, he does. A nice swap between the two Williams drivers. Zalan Bieda getting his way through on Victor Vidler. Same with Stephen Vaso on Tamas Kokeni. You could just see how much Kokeni struggles through that chicane. It's actually Koya going to be under some pressure here from Casper Flack. Daniel is going to go for that move actually to try and defend this one on Tamas Kokeni. He's going to go to the inside line. That's how you attack to defend from the car behind. But Flack also able to see himself through, and Kokeni struggling all over the road. He's now allowed Labella, Elia as well to go by, as they are all trying to squabble for room on the tarmac, and Kokeni dropping further and further down a big slide, and somehow able to hang on to it as we now head down into turn 1. Here comes Steg, and he drops down to 16th place from what was 5th only 2 laps ago. And it is just doom and gloom here for not only Kokeni, but potentially Victor Vidler as well, as he started to fall into the clutches of his teammate Stephen Vaso.
Yeah, and he's about to get overtaken here once more by Gallané, who is now trying to go around the outside, but has to yield there a little bit, and now ends up in a fight instead with Beisner. But further up ahead, the gaps have increased. Rowson is 1.8 seconds away from our top 3, who have indeed managed to break away. Then it's Galindo, followed by Piasecki, who did manage to cut down that gap back to within DRS range. Then it's Bieder, who's 2.3 seconds down. Vaso and Vidler are fighting tooth to nail for P8. But they also have to make sure that they stay within that 1 second of Zalan Bieder, so they at least keep that third train alive. Otherwise, they will be leading the train all the way down to P19, our final spot, as Kokeni now did lose a place to both of the Kick Saubers, and it's just Dave Gobadi behind him. I think Kokeni will be coming in at the end, but actually it's our race leader, Francesco Lago, who's decided to dive into pit lane, going for a very early pit stop. He will have to drive 19 laps on those hards, and that means that the man up ahead, Zontos and Dimas, will be pushing this lap, because you can only imagine they're going to come in at the end of this lap.
Surely they will react, or will they just wait a little bit longer to get that tyre deficit? And luckily for Largo, he is going to be able to come out in some clean air. I was wondering, potentially, with all that scrapping behind, will they just potentially hold him up ever so slightly? But no, he's got 5 seconds to now push on into and see what he can do at the front of the field. Shontos versus Alexander Dimas. Actually, Shontos has been able to break away to around about 8/10 of a second. Big DRS open for the Mercedes, but the Red Bull now in that clean air, starting to break clear. And are we going to see him come into pit lane this time around? That is going to be the big question here for Gabor Shontos. A big slide through turn 10, just able to hang on to the car on the exit of the corner as we now head into turn 11. Later the brakes, of course, once again. And for Alexander Dimas, if he potentially wants to undercut, he'll need to come in this time around. And the question is, where do they come out in relation to Francesco Largo? Has the V-Carb got the undercut? And they both stay out for another lap.
Yeah, but behind them, Jensen Ralston was in P3, does come into pit lane, followed by Piasecki. I think a couple more might dive into pit lane. Kaya's gone in as well. Flak stays out. Steck, of course, is going to stay out as well if we have a little bit of a drop there. But I want to see in relation to Lago where they're going to come out. The good news for Lago is, though, that he is already quickly closing in to Ave Gobadi up ahead. And I think, yeah, Kokeni has gone for his pit stop, so I think he will be changing that front wing. Have to see that in a moment. I also want to see if Vaso has cleaned up his front wing, but by the looks of it, he is still missing that front wing end plate. So he feels that damage, it does not warrant a front wing change, which could be good news, but could also be bad news, as Kaya managed to dive into that gap that the Ferrari left, and he is now ahead of Boba in P15. Although 7 drivers still need to come into pit lane, and he will be ahead of quite a few of those.
Yes, they certainly do, and Francesco Largo isn't really gaining too rapidly onto Shontos and Dimas. They have actually held some quite good pace over the past few laps, potentially just holding some in reserve for this last sprint to end the stint. And here comes Shontos and Dimas really sliding the rallycross style their way through the pit lane entrance. And where are they going to come out in relation to Francesco Largo, who's now just heading up through the penultimate corner, I think, or is it through the final corner? Just through the penultimate corner now, and now into the final corner. Francesco Largo, is he going to be able to maintain that race lead, or will Shontos and Dimas be able to get the jump? No, they will not. He just comes out in front. No, yes, they will. Shontos on that overcut has been able to get through, but Largo with a superior run through turns 1 and 2. Now going to be on the inside, heading up into turn 4, but backs out of it. So the overcut is exactly what you wanted. It's exactly where you needed to be. And for Gabor Shontos, he inherits now the net race lead. And Francesco Largo, who is the leader of this train since lap 1, unfortunately, has now just seen Gabor Shontos snatched it away due to those pit stops. Brilliant pace from the Red Bull and the Mercedes.
Yeah, that is an amazing pit stop by Shontos. He also managed to increase the gap on Dimas there a little bit, who did in turn manage to get back into DRS. But look at that, Ralston, Piasecki and Bieder are back within a second of the front pack. So the gap that they had before our pit stops is now gone, and we see more and more cars within that same DRS window. So it looks like Lago did not push those tires all too hard, knowing that he had to drive on them longer than his competitors. And we still have a few drivers that have to get into pit lane. Those are Flak and Gobadi. Gobadi has now gone in. Flak likely will come in the next lap. As for Steck and Beisner, they're going to stay out for a couple more laps before they feel their hards are no longer good enough, as Piasecki currently sets the fastest lap time in a 1:18.1. And yeah, actually Flak might try to contest Steck for that race lead together with Beisner. So let's keep our eyes locked on them for now before we move to the real race fight, because it's Gabor Shontos who is provisionally leading this race.
He certainly is indeed. 6 seconds behind Lucas Beisner. Well, he's come in ever so shortly. I'm expecting him and Steck to be in around about lap 15 to 16 as he's actually able to get past Kasper Flak. There is Lucas Beisner to move himself up into that second place. But the real battles are behind. That is where they do lie. And of course, with Francesco Largo, he'll want to take back that race lead, but he's going to bide his time, I think, him, if he's just going to wait for that perfect opportunity to strike. But he's actually coming under some pressure from Alexander Dimas, who potentially spoiled that party. The Dutchman trying to make his way through, but has to just sit behind for now. But I'm expecting this to be certainly a DRS train until that final lap, unless somebody wants to throw their hand at things like a Jensen Rosen to potentially just cause some chaos. As Flak gets a 10-second time penalty, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a retirement into pit lane.
It does continue at least for now, but that 10-second definitely not is going to help him out, as he will be pushed back towards the back of the grid. And if we have a safety car later on, then that will surely kill all of his hopes to get any points. For now, he still has a chance to at least cut down on a little bit, but he finds himself in P17, which is not going to be an easy feat for him. Let's look at Dimas more, because he is definitely amping up the pressure onto Lago up ahead, managing to stay within around those 310s as he's trying to get a nice slipstream down in that second DRS zone. The gap up ahead to Zontas is too much, but I think for now he will just be trying to just relax here, and towards the final few laps really try and contest Lago and Zontas for that race win. In the meantime, Galindo has managed to get within a second of Bieder 2. So that means that we have 7 cars in the leading DRS train that can all still fight for this race win. But we see how quickly it can end in tears. If you make one mistake, lose a front wing end plate, you can find yourself all the way down to the back of the grid.
Yes, you certainly can, and we saw that with Galindo, Fiddler and Kokeni. Of course, Kokeni went down the inside into this corner here, turn 1. Unfortunately, Galindo had to cut across the grass and then had no control of the car when he was on that slippery surface, and slid straight back across into the path of Kokeni and Fiddler. And unfortunately, contact was made between all 3 of them, with the McLaren and the Alpine, unfortunately, coming off worse and picking up some front wing end plate damage. But for Francesco Largo, of course, he's still adapting to this dirty air for now around here of Australia. Been in the clean air for the majority of this race. And I think that's where Dimas and Shontos are just able to get that upper hand on him, is that Dimas has been able to keep in this dirty air for the whole race, so he understands how the car feels, compared to Francesco Largo and Shontos being in that clean air, the front of the car not sliding, the rear not getting loose, under braking either, and he's just able to hold on to that car nicely. But of course, still a long way to go, still 13 laps remaining in this Grand Prix, and looking to the inside there was Francesco Largo. On Francesco Largo was Alexander Dimas, not able to get it done, but I wouldn't be surprised up into the penultimate corner if we see the Dutchman go for the move.
Yeah, and another man who's getting very close to the driver up ahead is Carlos Galindo, currently finding himself in P9, P7 provisionally, and very close to the back of Zalan Bieder in the Alpine. Let's see if we can get a good view of that, as we have a little bit of teleporting going on there, meaning that the gap has also increased a tad bit. Behind him, Valentino Labella is still 2 seconds away from them, so it looks like they won't be contesting them for the race win at all. So it is the top 7 drivers that will be going for that win here tonight. So that means the likes of Zontas, Lago, Dimas, Rausin, Pieszczki, Bieder and Galindo will be competing for that race win, of which still Dimas is the closest to his next competitor, actually starting to get within 2/10 of Lago up ahead. But I don't think he can find a place just yet where he can really make a move and make that move stick. But then again, Max, I don't think he wants to. It's still too early.
It is. It's still well too early to go for that move. Of course, if you're Dimas or Jensen Rosen, you potentially warrant go for the move on the car in front. But if you're Francesco Largo, it's well too early. You want to wait till the final lap, really, to try and get this move done on the lead car of Gabor Shontos. Of course, Beta and Wojtek Szczega leading this one on the road. But the lead one in this pack, the leader of the race, when those two come into pit lane, will be Gabor Shontos. And you don't want to go for that move this early on, but Alexander Dimas is really starting to pose a threat. He's getting really close, especially up into turn 1 here this time around. That gap was around about a 10th by the time we exited out of that final corner. But still no move being made. I think the real issue is for Dimas here, Myth, is that if he does go for that move of Francesco Largo, but he just misjudges it ever so slightly, maybe just overshoots the corner and gets into a squabble with Largo, it's the fact that they'll lose so much time to Shontos that he could just streak off into the distance and win this Grand Prix. So it's all about those mentally trying to figure everything out. It's a high-speed game of chess. It's very much in your head as well to really analyse when to go for moves. And that's Dimas's biggest roadblock at the minute, is trying to manage the amount of time lost if he does go for an overtake.
Yeah, and another thing that we can see is that the top pack does not have that maximum pace. Looks like Zontas is indeed trying to lift and coast a little bit, because behind Labella, who was a lap and a half ago about 2 seconds away, has now managed to get the gap down to under a second even behind Galindo, moving himself within that lead pack, now moving it up and bumping it up to 8 cars. Tomasetto Elia is still 2.1 seconds away, so I'm not sure if he will be breaking grounds anytime soon, but if he does, then the likes of Vasokayo, Boba, and Galaney will also be within that time frame. So could be great news for them, as Zontos is not gaining out too much anymore on the two men that haven't stopped yet. Last lap gaining about 4 to 5 tenths. He's now losing a little bit through that first sector. But I think in about 2 to 3 laps max, Steg and Beisner will be coming in, and then we'll see the full potential of these men unleashed with 11 laps still to go here in Albert Park.
Yeah, we certainly will. I do believe as well that Zontos is just backing off to make sure he don't catch up to Beisner and Steg, and make sure that he's not going to be caught in any sort of dirty error or any unnecessary instance with the two in front going longer in this race. They'll be much slower on traction and on braking earlier, into some of these corners. But he is now starting to break away from Francesco Largo. That gap now 6 tenths of a second. Further back, is there going to be any moves made potentially from Carlos Galindo onto the inside of Zalan Biedo, looking for the move, just not committing enough, a little bit half-hearted. But I think that was mainly just to avoid going into the back of the Alpine. Already made contact with one, do not want to make contact with the other, as Wojtek Steg now darts into pit lane. Beisner stays out for one more. Let's see where Steg comes out in relation to the rest of the field and how many places he can make up on those mediums.
Yeah, I do wonder how quick those mediums are going to be, because he has to start all the way at the back of the grid. How much overspeed will you have? Or is this going to be a very, very tough run all the way through? Will he be ahead of Kokeni? It looks like he is ahead ever so slightly, but might find himself behind him shortly indeed. Santos now within 2.6 of Beisner. I think Beisner will come into pit lane the next lap, and in a moment we will see how quick Steg will be indeed. But the downside for him really is that the gap from Whitler to Gobadi up ahead is 4.2 seconds, so it'll be a very tough run to then get everyone closed in. But look at Tomasetto Ilia. He's gone within the lead train as well. He's now hovering around that 1 second mark, meaning that Vasokayo, Boba, Galaney, and Flack are all within the lead DRS train. So we now have 14 cars that are still within that same DRS train. And that means especially the guys with the least amount of time done on their hearts, and the likes of Galindo, Dimas, and Jantos, those will be the men that have the biggest threat to take that top step of the podium. But of course, there's more drivers that could still go for it. I would have named Flack in that discussion, but with that penalty for him, sadly, will be very tough for him to beat.
Certainly will be indeed, as Victor Vidler speeds into pit lane, and he is our second retirement of the season. Unfortunate to see after a strong qualifying and opening stint to the race. It all just unfortunately went horribly wrong with that contact earlier on. As we see Alexander Dimas still over the back of Francesco Largo, starting to hemorrhage more time. Surely Dimas has to pull the pin eventually and get that move done on the V-carb in front. You can't just be sitting around for eternity for the rest of this race before you try and get that move. You've got to get it done as early as you can to negate the amount of time lost. But Largo is able to catch up with the battery, heading down into turns at 9 and 10. But if Dimas sees potentially Largo drop to that 8 to 9 tenth region again, you surely think he's going to go for it and negate that time loss and be able to cling on to the back of Gabor Shontos in front. But the only issue is here for Dimas as well, here, Myth, is the fact he's just going to need such a superb run out of one of these corners with the DRS compared to Francesco Largo, because they both have that drag reduction system and the slipstream from the car in front.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy feat to go for that overtake and to also make that overtake stick. So that will be his tough threat, but also opportunity for this race out there. We have more and more drivers starting to close in. Steg's about 5 seconds away from that lead DRS train. He's gained about half a second in the roundabout half to full lap that we just saw, so he's struggling to get very close, but he definitely has overspeed on everyone else. But with the lead pack driving a little bit slower, it feels like the DRS train should have more power, having 4 DRS zones that Steg doesn't have. But because it seems like the leading pace is that little bit lower, it should be easier for Steg to get back. And once he is there, how easy will it be for him to overtake? I think the best thing for him here, Max, if he comes away with a couple points, but going all the way into the top 5, I think it's going to be really, really tough for him.
Yeah, I think it certainly will, of course. The more laps he takes to get to the back of this field, the more he'll take out of the tyre, as Casper Flack is going to be squabbling away with Buba as well as they head through into the penultimate corner, as they're squabbling over 12th place on the road. But yeah, for Wojtek Steg, it depends how much he takes out of that tyre. If he takes a lot out of it by the time he gets to that field, I wouldn't be surprised if he's only able to make his way up to the potential of either P11 or P10, as he actually sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix now. 1.2 seconds is his gap to Ave Gabadi, so he's about 2.4 away from the field in front. As round the outside goes Casper Flack on Buba, just wasn't able to get the move done. It was late breaking defence from the Scuderia Ferrari driver, and he was able to hold on to that 12th place on the road for now. But of course, Casper on those 8-lap hold hards will have better wear, better performance, better purchase as well. Under braking and on traction, he should be able to make his way through on Buba ever so shortly. But this is inviting Ave Gabadi onto the back of them, which in turn is inviting Wojtek Steg a little bit earlier than scheduled onto the back of this DRS train. And could this be the window of opportunity to at least try and break into the top 10?
Well, he needs to get the overtakes done as soon as possible. Starting with that should be next lap. He does not have DRS just yet, but he is now within 8/10s. Didn't even lose much time in the middle sector where the others had 2 DRS zones. So down the start-finish straight, he will have that DRS, close down ever some more, and maybe even into turn 3, try and go for his first real overtaking opportunity on the Ferrari up ahead. Currently in P15, but definitely more in the tank for him, as further up ahead, everything still seems to be the same as has been for quite a while. So we're going to move from our detail tire back to the positions change so we can see how much has changed since the race started. Zontos and Lago swap places. Rowson's up by 2, Przeszki by 3, and Bieder even by 4 places. But the biggest gainer in our top 10, Tomasetto Elia, gained 6 places, starting P15 now in P9.
Brilliant race so far from Tomasetto Elia to move himself that far up the field. Of course, good potential for some more positions to be gained as this race wears on. Of course, on lap 23 of 29, now 7 laps to go in this race. And Wojtek Steg is all over the back of Ave Gabadi. Is he going to go for the move this time around, potentially into turn 11 as we just exit out of the flip-flap chicane? A big wobble for Gabadi. This surely opens the door for Wojtek Steg to go to the inside line. It does. He's late on the brakes, nearly into the back of Casper Flack in front, but he is able to move up into that 14th place, and Gabadi unfortunately has to cede position as we head up into the penultimate corner now. Wojtek Steg is here. He's ready for a fight. And is he going to be able to make his way up into the top 10? That is the question. With everybody having DRS, he's going to have to rely on those mediums having such superior traction and braking performance to make his way up through the order.
Yeah, so how well can he do with the braking into turn 1 and 2? It looks like he's done so quite well, but has to fully send it on the inside of turn 3. He's trying to look for it, but has decided against it, and in turn it's the V-carb that outshoots itself, outbrakes itself. Now around the outside, Steg gets pushed wide. He wants to stay on the inside, but does not have enough position there. A slight tap with the wall as it seems as well, but no damage occurred from that, as he now heads into the second DRS zone. Still ever so close, within 2/10s, has to use quite a bit of battery power to even get close enough, but I'm not sure if he can go for a move here. It's starting to look to the outside, now back to the inside, but has to yield. Now then, to turn 9 and 10 we go. Get a better exit there, but it looks like Flag has not made a mistake there either. So everything still stays as it is, as it's a dart down the inside, sends it fully, will have the superior position on track, and he has gone out ahead. Now that is what you call a full send. Great move by Steg up into P13.
That was a very nice move there from Wojtek Steg. I don't think Flat would be too happy with the amount of contact there was, but still at the end of the day, that was hard racing. They both survived, and they were both able to stay onto the racing facilities. It was a real tough move, as Lucas Bass has now joined this group of cars as well, as he's trying to make his way now up past Ave Gabadi. So we could see a move here for 15th place, as Bass to the inside, potentially to the inside of Flack as well, but no, just having to sit behind the V-carb. So for Lucas Bass, he is up to 15th as well. He's got 1 lap fresher tyres as well to Wojtek Steg, so his tyres will hit the cliff a little bit later than the Red Bull driver in front. But as these guys now try to carve their way through the field like a hot knife through butter, we're going to see if this has any internal effects to the front of the field. If anybody could potentially go for moves further up and use this as a case to react to the car in front of them, that is going to be the question. But everybody is still around about 8 tenths behind one another. As Wojtek Szczek, could he get another move done? This time on the second scooter at Ferrari of Buba into turn 11.
No, but behind him, we do see a move attempt at least by Beisner. Sees Flack go wide, and he will be ahead of the V-Carb. Beisner now slotting in behind Steg, who finds himself stuck in P13 for the time being. Still needs to get 3 more overtakes done if he wants to come away with any points here tonight. And we have already entered lap 26 out of 29. Will he try to go for a move into turn 1? He does pull out to have a little look, but he knows he can't do so yet. Has to get a good exit through 1 and 2 and then go for the dart down in P3, but it looks like he is too far away. Has to save a little bit of battery, which is exactly what he does. We see a little bit of locking up by Boba up ahead. The Ferrari man really starting to struggle, trying to hang on to the back of that Aston Martin, and now Steck can get a good turn 8. He might find himself ahead of the Ferrari and in P12 at the end of the second DRS zone, but looks like for now Steg can't get ahead as Gallané has retired from the session.
Yeah, unfortunately for Gallané, another driver with a good qualifying, unfortunately unravelled, and here comes Wojtek Szczek to the outside of Buba, but not able to get the move done on the Ferrari, but he needs a good exit out of here because he's under pressure as well, potentially in the next couple of corners from Lucas Beisner as we head down into turn 11, but nowhere near close enough, and I think this is where those mediums here, Myth, start to plateau. This is what we saw from the likes of Largo, Shontos and Dimas. When we got to this stage, those medium tyres, they just start to hit that cliff of performance. They're not able to give you the purchase, the amount of grip that you need to fight with the cars around you, and it certainly is going to dive downwards in terms of performance, and potentially they might get stuck in this part of the train. And what don't help them is the train's not separated driver by driver, and they're having to sit behind Boba for now, and Lucas Beisner is going to potentially try and take that 13th place away from Wojtek Szczek, but the plateau certainly has begun, and I think this is potentially how high both of these drivers on the mediums can get.
Yeah, we see further up ahead, I think Santos is finally starting to pick up the pace a little bit. We just saw PSGL move out of the 1 second mark for a moment's notice, and he is out of that once again. Does he not have... He still does have that DRS, so that is good news. But he really has to push that Haas car if he wants to stay within the top 4 and still have a potential shot at a podium this race, because we're approaching the final 2 laps out there. Dimas is again getting closer to Lago up ahead, so it looks like the gloves are coming on here, Max, and we're getting ready for a thrilling final 2 laps here at Albert Park, where all of our drivers will be fighting for the first race win of the season here in PCF3. Will it be Zontos, Lagos, Dimas, or anyone else still out there on track? For now, Zontos has the best cars in hand with a gap of 6 tenths over on Lago.
Yeah, he's got a lovely gap at the moment, has Gabor Shontos. 5 different nationalities in the top 5 different constructors as well. You've got the Hungarian of Shontos in the Red Bull, the Italian of Largo in the V-Carb, the Dutchman of Dimas in the Mercedes, the Brits in the Williams of Jensen Rosen, and then the Polish man of Igor Brzezinski in the Haas. But he's dropped 1.7 seconds behind, so it's going to be a shootout between the top 4. But so far for Gabor Shontos, he is very much in the good. He is clear of Francesco Largo, and he's just stretched his legs, I think, a little bit too far away for the Italian to catch up to. And this is where I say Dimas may have just bided his time a little bit too long. He should have went when he's around that 2 to 3 tenth mark behind. He should have just went for it. If you lose a little bit of time, it's fine. You can earn it back in the DRS over the course of the next few laps. But a Dutchman just waited that little bit too long, and Shontos is now streaking off into the distance. That gap now 8 tenths of a second as we're about to start the final tour of the circuit. And I think, unless a huge mistake comes out of the Hungarian, he is going to take the first win of the season, and in quite some style, as that gap's now over a second.
Yeah, with the gap now being over a second, we have to see where that DRS mark is. I think he got there just in time so that Lago will have DRS here, and he indeed still does have that. But Zontos is starting to pull away, and it looks like he has managed to tires as well as he possibly could in order to stay ahead. That gap now 1.1 seconds. I don't think Lago is going to be able to come back within that range, which means that the only real fights that we're still going to see are with Dimas and Ralston potentially contesting for a P2 or 3. Dimas did pick up a little bit of grass there, trying to go too deep. Jantos is gone. Dimas now has to close that gap because there's no DRS up ahead. He can see that as well, so he knows he needs to bide his time until turn 11 to go for that move. Get a good exit here. It looks like those tires of Lago are indeed too old, but here we go then. Dimas, this will be the only chance that he gets at a P2. Defense coming in, wants to go for the inside, tries to outbrake him. They keep each other alive, but it's not enough alongside for Dimas there. So will need to go for a late send down into turn 13. He doesn't either, and that means it will be Gabor Santos who gets the first race win of the season. The Red Bull man does it here in Albert Park, and it's a round 1 win for Santos, ahead of Lago, ahead of Dimas. Then it's Ralston. We cross the line 5th for Piasecki. Then it's Bieder, Galindo, Labella, Tomasetto, Ilya, Vaso, and Kairas. Flak gets another 10-second penalty for an unserved penalty. Not that that is going to matter much more, but Max, we've seen some great performance from Santos all the way through, and the key here was the pit stop strategy. Staying out 2 laps later, but getting the overcut done on Lago was the way to win this race here tonight.
It certainly was. Brilliantly done from Gabor Santos to take the maiden race win of the season. He will now inherit that championship lead with it as well. But that is what everybody was expecting from the Hungarian. He is surely going to be the title favourite, a driver known on the PC community to be very fast indeed. Potentially was a little bit of a shock to be down here in F3, but he has certainly taken to it like a duck to water, and Francesco Lago dropped 2.4 seconds in that final lap behind, as Alexander Dimas will round out your podium in 3rd. A good display from some of the F4 drivers who've made that step up. Dimas, Rosa, and Piasecki, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, certainly showing they can throw it with the guys at the front of this order. There's Bieder in 6th, 7th Galindo, Labella, 8th, 9th for Tomasetto Alea, 10th for Stephen Vaso, Daniel Koya in 11th, Buba 12th, Wojtek Stegen, Lucas Beza only able to recover to 13th and 14th, Gabani 15th, Kokeni 16th after that unfortunate damage from that Galindo incident, Klasper Fleck in 17th. Then your DNFs are Galilei, Vidler, and also Oleg Napodovsky. But what a race that was, and Gabor Santos, I would say, a deserved winner, because throughout the course of that race, even when he was sitting behind Lago, he just seemed to have the pace to go forwards, and then pulled off some brilliant tyre management to keep them within just that sweet spot for the final couple of laps.
Yeah, had some great space out there. We saw him already come close a little bit in that first stint. But what they did very well, as we already mentioned before, together with Dimas, waiting a couple of laps after Lago did come into that pit lane, then go 2 laps later, get the overcut done. He was actually quite a bit faster in pit lane compared to Dimas. I think over half a second, and that half a second was enough to pip Lago to that provisional race lead, which then turned into race lead and eventually in a race win for Santos. So great job by him all the way through. In the meantime, I'm quickly going to look in the chat if any of the drivers are ready for some interviews, because we have some time to do that. And if we have some interviews, we might see the likes of Santos, Lago and Dimas head in the comms box to share their words on the opening round this season. But we've had quite a good one. Max, what's on the calendar next week?
Next week on the calendar, we head down under from Australia to the Ardennes Forest of Belgium for Spa, for what should be a very frantic race indeed. A brilliant track to go to for the second round of the season, and we should see plenty of action round there, especially up through Rouge, Radion, and down Le Kemmel Straight with that DRS on the final lap, and of course up into Blochemont and into the bus stop chicane. It should be a frantic evening of action, and plenty of overtakes should be on the cards around Spa.
Yeah, and by the looks of it, it looks like Lago is available to do some interviews. We're yet to hear back from any of the other drivers. But yeah, you hear it next week. Great race up ahead. Spa-Francorchamps, one of the best tracks that we have out there on the calendar, which has been there for quite a bit more time than the track where we raced today. Just waiting for the guys now to head into the waiting room. Also gives us a little bit more time to look at the calendar. I'm going to pull up a little bit more because Max already said it. The next race is in Belgium before we head to Texas and a break week. Then it's Monaco on the calendar. That will be an interesting one for most of our drivers. Followed by Austria, Canada, Britain, the Grand Prix of Silverstone, and then it's Mexico that we will have before our break week. But for your PS side of things, will be in the new year. And then our final 3 rounds around Jeddah, Brazil, and as how a season should end in Abu Dhabi, round 11 will be the final race of the season. So quite a few months of racing up ahead that we saw kicked off tonight. You can, of course, now in a moment also tune in with F2 or F4 if you have some of your favorite drivers out there. They have now started their qualifying sessions. If you want to stick around to hear from our top 3 a little bit more for the interviews, do stay around. Dimas is not available for the interviews, it seems. Hopefully Zontos will be, and in a moment we can move on to those interviews, Max.
Yeah, hopefully we can. Just waiting on Francesco Largo as well to join the interview waiting room to hear his thoughts on what was a frantic Australian Grand Prix. And of course, he took pole position, so led the championship at one stage heading into that race. But unfortunately, was not able to convert it into a race victory. Talking about Francesco Largo, he now drops in to the waiting room. So shall we bring him in, Myth, to hear his thoughts from Australia, from round 1 of the season?
So another season in F3. First of all, the placements, you happy to be where you are?
Yeah, I am. Seeing that I didn't get that many points in season 1, so happy to be in F3. I think that my pace is enough to fight for a championship here, so I'm happy.
Well, we saw in the qualifying session that you had massive pace out there. Your first run, you were quite a bit quicker than anyone else there out on the field. Were you surprised at all to do so well in quali?
I actually wasn't, because we found a good setup in SCI thanks to Joe and the others, and so I had a 0.0 PB, so I was pretty confident about quali. One thing is though, I had no warm-up whatsoever because I had to come back home really late, so I was happy to get pole even with the circumstances on the day.
Yeah, because we saw down the middle sector, you were down almost by 1/10 on your previous fastest lap, so we weren't really expecting you to shoot up that much. But that final sector had a lot of improvements still left in it.
Yeah, I think the bunker was really good, sector 1, sector 2, but sector 3 was a bit... so I knew that even being red by almost a 10th, I could still make it up in the last, so I got a good last, got pole. Wasn't enough for the race, but I'm still happy.
Yeah, and then of course we had the race. You had a good start out there. You managed to keep everyone behind for all the way through the first pit stop sequence. You were the first one to head into pit lane. You saw your nearest competitors come into the pit lane 2 laps later. Were you surprised at all that Zontos managed to pip you and get the overcut done?
I wasn't surprised that he came out ahead because I pit just to cover the 2 behind. Like, I didn't want to come out in P3, even with good tires. Then I had to save a lot in the first few laps not to destroy the tires. I had to introduce them really slowly. So I wasn't surprised when I saw Gabor ahead. I decided to stay behind to try and save and make up for that delta in the tire, but clearly wasn't enough at the end. Gabor saved well, so he got the win.
Yeah, then despite all of that, it never seemed really like you were that much under threat to drop down to P3 either.
No, because I knew Dimas had a bit worse tire than me. He was pushing a lot in the first stint, in the second stint, never quite saving. So I could just control the gap, going on DRS when he was too far back to make a move. The only real moment when he had a chance, it was the last lap when Gabor just about dropped me from the DRS 1.1. So I was really low on DRS and I had to brake really late on the first corner of sector 3 to defend, but it went well, so I'm happy.
All right, that's great to hear. Well, nonetheless, congratulations on your first podium. Moving on to Maxen, any questions from you?
Yeah, congratulations for that second place there, Francesco. But one from me, of course. We head over to Spa next time out in Belgium. First of all, are you going to be racing? Second of all, how confident are you around there? Do you think you can replicate this performance or potentially get to that top step?
I am going to be racing and I'm really confident for Spa. It's historically one of my best tracks, so I'm looking forward to driving it next week and try and replicate quali and maybe improve the race, getting P1.
Yeah, well, congratulations on your second place, and hopefully that historically going well around there does correlate into that first place. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you back here next week as the race winner.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you as well, and have a good one. All right, so I think that is going to round off our interviews tonight, because our men finishing in P3, well, Dimas was not coming, Zontos, we did hear from in the chat, but not whether he would be joining us in the comment box or not. So it looks like that will be it for the interviews tonight, meaning that we are going to round off things as well. Now, we already mentioned before we have our week in break 3, between week 3 and 4, sorry about that. We still have races in Spa and in 2 weeks time around Texas, but our eyes will be set on Spa-Francorchamps for next week. It will be Zontos leading the championship. The pole sitter, of course, that we just interviewed will be very happy with that extra point and will be fighting tooth to nail for another pole position next week out. Hopefully next week we will also see the likes of Martens and Langrock. We didn't see tonight. They sadly couldn't make it here, but hopefully next week they will be in as well. As for us, Max, I think we had a pretty nice start to the season with a couple of fights, but not really any real incidents.
No, except from that one we saw with Kenny and Co. It was very much a clean, I think a slow burner, that one as well. One to just slowly break us into the season. But I'm expecting, as we get a little bit further on, drivers start to understand how they race and how each other go racing. We'll see more on-track action and more in fierce squabbles for positions. And I think we're going to have a very interesting title on our hands, of course. You got those hot shots from F4, you got Shontos, you got Largo as well in the mix. So it all just will correlate to very much a close scrap in this division. And I think this will go all the way down to Abu Dhabi with a mere few points potentially separating the top 5 to 6 potentially in the championship, all having an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely looks like we have a few drivers that are really close to each other, and not only in quali pace but also in race pace. So yeah, the likes that you mentioned will be fighting for that. I'm also curious to see how Napadovsky is going to do next week out, seeing how strong he was last season. And see if Piasecki, Galindo and Raulson can pick up the pace and move themselves in with those top competitors. Same can be said about Kokeni, who is usually quite fast in quali and can do well in the races too, although today definitely was not his day. We will be rounding off this stream for here tonight. We'll be back once again next Thursday, 7 p.m. British Standard Time, 8 p.m. for the rest of us Europeans. For now, you can still tune in with F2 and F4 here on YouTube. As for us, from myself, Sky, and from Max, this was it for tonight. Have a good one, and we'll see you next week in Belgium.